Hi, this is just a simple video explaining the 5 elements of Ayurveda. So, starting with fire. Fire is kind of like the explosion of life. You could say it's almost like the Big Bang. It's hot and it's dry. It has upward moving energy. Fire goes upwards, it's expanding. Now, fire also is associated with emotional outbursts, such as anger. You could say someone is someone is very spicy, or you could say, "Oh, they're on fire." That's another expression that's not associated with anger, but you can see how it's all very similar. It's someone who is kind of on hyperdrive. And when you're really going for something and when you're really pushing for something, if you don't get it, you can get really angry. And so those are kind of very similar. So they're both considered of the fire element. Um, the next element is I'll do the opposite one. The opposite to that is water. And water has a downward moving motion. Water is calm. You know, Taoism has a lot to say about water. They say, be like water, go with the flow, um, be at peace with things. That's very water. Um, Water doesn't have a form, it just kind of does whatever it does and it just goes with the flow going downwards. It's considered a cold element and it's wet. I should have mentioned earlier fire is considered hot and dry. Water is cold and wet. Fire is upwards, water is downwards. Within the body, you can understand this philosophy because things that tend to heat up, people who tend to be really hot in nature, the heat tends to be up, it tends to go upwards. A lot of people end up with cold hands and feet, but their upper area and their head, even like your head, for some reason, when you get a fever, your head gets hot. Isn't that strange? It's the upward movement of the fire, of the heat. So I'll go to the next one. That would probably be Earth. Earth is much more concrete. It's kind of like the brick wall, so to speak. Earth is going to stand its ground. Earth is cold and dry. Sometimes I used to think Earth was cold and wet, and then I found out, oh, it's actually dry, as opposed to water, which is cold and wet. Earth is cold and dry. And Earth is kind of more stubborn emotionally. They're kind of stuck in their ways. They're not going to really see things from a different perspective. They're more traditional, more conservative, but also more grounded, more present. So the next element is air. Air is light, obviously. It's going to be very not as grounded. It has an upward moving motion energetically. It's moving upward. This is a little off subject, but in Chinese medicine they have something called wind, which is kind of when the air element gets out of control. I'm mixing two different systems, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, just to warn you, but it's kind of the same idea that wind is the air element gone out of control, and it causes things like seizures and all sorts of issues, like trembling. You can't. You can't stop shaking your hands. That's a wind condition. So it's kind of the opposite of being grounded. It's kind of the opposite of earth. And so someone who is who has lots of wind element, or I mean, sorry, wind is actually one of the evils of Chinese medicine. It's not a good thing. I'm not talking about wind. I'm talking about air. But wind is when air is unstable. But air is going to be very lighthearted. It's going to be cold and dry. So the very last element is ether. And ether is it's kind of hard to explain because it's kind of nothing. It's kind of the container of the other elements. It's I like to think of it as the universal mind, the force behind all of existence. It's kind of everything and nothing at the same time. So because of that, it's considered to lack the heat. So, and this is Ayurvedic thinking, so therefore it's cold. Although they don't really attribute ether element with anything else besides just being cold. It's kind of a non-existent sort of thing. I like to think of it kind of like this. If ether was your mind, your consciousness, I should say, then fire would be like the spark, the the thing that sets off a thought, like the beginning of a thought, the beginning of action. What makes you take action? That's fire. That's that spark. It's kind of like the universe exploding into existence, the Big Bang. That's the spark. And the universal mind is behind that. That kind of represents you and your own consciousness, too, on a microcosm level. So then from there, the air element is also associated in Ayurveda. The air element and the ether element are put together to create Vata, and Vata is associated with the nervous system, the whole nervous system. I would say that ether is probably more so the central nervous system, which is the brain and spine, and air is more like the peripheral nervous system, which is where all the nerves outside of the central nervous system are. And so that's kind of what controls your body. Air is about movement. You know, the air, it moves. It's not as stable as earth. And so when you move your arm, that there's an air element going on there. So I've gone from ether, which is the consciousness, so to speak, the fire, which is the spark that gets things going, the inspiration, and the air, which is the movement. So then there's the earth, which is the physical body itself. And so that's pretty self-explanatory. That could also be the muscle that the wind is moving. Say the wind, or the air, I should say, not wind. The air is moving the muscles, similar to the air blows and it just blows stuff around and it creates mountains out of dust. The last element is water. And so water is kind of what what goes through all of this and kind of cleanses and washes it away and cools it, calms it back down so that you get kind of aggravated from the fire. Um, the nervous system is in movement. Things are going on. The body is there, and it's trying to just exist without being destroyed by all these other forces. And the water is there to kind of nourish the body, um, nourish all of these other elements. They're all connected. You can't exist without all of the elements. All of the elements exist in every single person. It's just that some people have more, or have a tendency to have more of one element or the other. So after this video, I'm going to make a video about the three doshas. And the three doshas in Ayurveda are probably the most important part to understand if you want to understand Ayurveda. The doshas are made of two different elements combined, and they're just general characteristics that people tend to have. And for some reason, these two different elements bind together. They tend to need each other, kind of like the yin yang. So, I hope you check out my next video, which will be posted below. Thank you for watching. Give this a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't.